They thought they were rescuing an orphan with no one left. But as their adopted daughter learned English, she began sharing memories that didn't match the story they were told. What unfolded next would expose a devastating truth and change everything. Stay tuned, because the truth is more heartbreaking than they ever imagined. And tell us in comments where you're watching from. Adam and Rachel Monroe had built a beautiful life in Asheville, North Carolina. 3 healthy kids, a warm home, and the kind of love that fills every corner. But in their hearts, they felt a quiet ache, like someone was missing. They didn't want another child. They wanted to give a child in need a second chance. When they found Heartbridge International, it felt like an answered prayer. The US-based adoption agency was everything they hoped for. Polished, professional, full of glowing reviews from families who said their lives had changed forever. And then came Nia, 5 years old, from East Africa. A tragic story in her file, her father, dead. Her mother, labeled abusive, recently deceased. The agency described her as completely alone. No relatives, no one looking for her. Rachel cried reading it. Adam didn't speak, just nodded, the weight in his eyes saying everything. They believed this was their chance to give a child in need not just a home, but a second chance at life. The process moved quickly, too quickly in hindsight. They paid the $120,000 fee and finalized the paperwork entirely from the United States. No travel, no questions, just trust. And then one quiet afternoon, Nia arrived. She was tiny, silent, and scared. She clutched a faded teddy bear to her chest and flinched at sudden sounds. She avoided eye contact, barely responded when spoken to, and didn't understand a word of English. For the first few days, it was like living with a ghost. Present, but unreachable. But slowly, cracks of light began to show. Rachel used picture cards. The other kids made silly faces and handed her crayons. At first, Nia only nodded or shook her head. Then she started whispering soft Swahili phrases under her breath. Within weeks, a few English words followed, simple things like water, yes, and play. She began to laugh. She began to trust. And most of all, she began to draw. Rachel kept every page. The drawings were stunning, far too intricate for a 5-year-old who had supposedly lived through neglect. She painted markets filled with baskets of mangoes, women in head wraps stirring pots over firewood, and large trees that reached into the sky. She even drew a small house with a silver tin roof, children chasing chickens, and always, a smiling woman with long braids. It wasn't just talent, it was memory. Then came the names. Mama Leah, she said one night out of nowhere. She sang when cooking. Rachel blinked. Mama Leah? Nia nodded. She braided my hair, like this. She mimed the motion carefully, her small fingers twisting the air. Rachel froze. She remembered the file. There had been no mention of love, no mention of lullabies or braids, just neglect, abuse, death. Who is Baraka? Rachel asked gently days later, after another drawing. My brother, Nia said, beaming. We run in the rain. Mama laughed. That night, Rachel sat in bed staring at the ceiling. Something didn't add up. This wasn't the story of a child who had escaped pain. This was a child ripped from joy. Rachel couldn't shake it. Every night after the kids were asleep, she would sit in the quiet and replay Nia's words. Mama Leah, Baraka, dancing in the rain. These weren't fragmented thoughts. They were vivid, specific, true. And the more Nia spoke, the clearer the picture became. This child hadn't come from trauma. She had come from love. But that wasn't what Heartbridge International had told them. Rachel pulled out the adoption file again. It was filled with official-sounding words. Abandonment, abuse, no known family. But none of it matched what Nia was saying. Not even close. One evening, Rachel cautiously asked, Nia, do you remember your home? Nia hesitated, then nodded. Yes, it was warm. Tin roof, red floor. Mama make ugali and stew. Baraka eat too much. She giggled. Rachel smiled weakly, masking the ache rising in her chest. She couldn't ignore it anymore. The agency had lied. She didn't know how or why, but something was wrong, deeply wrong. And Rachel knew she couldn't solve it on her own. So she called someone who could. Dr. Maya Lowell was a name she'd heard in a parenting forum, a child advocacy expert who had exposed several unethical international adoptions in recent years. Rachel emailed her, unsure if she'd even respond. She replied in less than an hour. They arranged a video call the next morning. Rachel laid it all out, the inconsistencies, the drawings, the memories, the way Nia spoke about her Mama Leah as if she had never left her at all. Maya didn't interrupt. She just listened. Then she leaned in. "I've seen this before," she said quietly. "Too many times." Rachel's breath caught. "These agencies don't always take orphans," Maya continued. "Sometimes they take children from poor families. They fabricate stories. Say the parents are abusive or dead. That way the adoption goes through faster. No one asks questions." Rachel felt the blood drain from her face. "So, what do I do?" "Let me look into it," Maya said. "I'll be in touch soon." Days passed. Rachel tried to stay focused on routine, packing lunches, folding laundry, reading bedtime stories. But beneath every task was a gnawing thought. What if Nia was never supposed to be here? A week later, Maya called back. She didn't waste time. "Nia's real name is Nia Nuru," she said. "She's from a village in Tanzania, and Rachel, her mother, is alive." Rachel dropped into a chair, her mouth open. "She's alive," she whispered. Rachel couldn't speak. She sat frozen as Maya's voice echoed through the speaker. "Her name is Leah Nuru. She never abandoned her daughter. She was tricked." Rachel's mind reeled. Nia had a mother, a real mother, alive, waiting, searching. How? She finally managed to whisper. Maya didn't hold back. Years ago, Leah Nuru had been approached by local representatives of Heartbridge International. They spoke Swahili, wore official badges, and claimed they had a special program. Nia, they said, had been chosen for an incredible opportunity, education in America. She'd return one day with knowledge and a bright future. It wasn't an adoption. It was a temporary arrangement. That's what they told her. Leah was hesitant. But she wanted more for her daughter: books, classrooms, a life beyond the village. She signed the papers, documents she couldn't read, and just like that, Nia was taken. She waited months, then years. No one came. When she tried contacting the people who'd taken Nia, the numbers no longer worked. The names were gone. The office in town emptied. Eventually, Leah realized the truth. They had stolen her child. But she didn't give up. She filed reports, reached out to anyone who would listen, even traveled hours to speak with aid workers and churches. She never stopped hoping, never stopped telling people, "My daughter is in America. Please help me find her." Rachel sat in stunned silence. Her heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. She had loved Nia like her own, but she now realized that love had been built on someone else's heartbreak. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "I can help you contact Leah," Maya replied, "but this needs to be handled gently, for Nia's sake. And for Leah's." Rachel nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. That night, she and Adam stayed up late, sitting in the dark, not saying much, just holding each other, caught in the weight of it all. They thought they had rescued a child with no family, but they had unknowingly taken someone's daughter. And now, it was time to make it right. Rachel knew there was no easy way to say it. How do you tell a child that her life story was a lie? That her mother wasn't gone, but had been searching for her all along? She and Adam spent days deciding how to approach it. They didn't want to cause fear or confusion, but they couldn't keep the truth from Nia, not anymore. They sat her down one quiet afternoon, the sun pouring through the kitchen window. Nia climbed into her chair, coloring book in hand. Rachel gently took it from her. "Nia," she said softly, "can we talk for a moment?" Nia looked up, curious. "There's something important we need to tell you," Adam added, his voice steady but trembling underneath. Rachel took a breath. "You remember Mama Leah? The one you've been painting? The one in your stories?" Nia's eyes lit up. "Yes, she braided my hair." Rachel's voice cracked. "She's real, Nia, and she's alive." Silence. Nia blinked, confused. Mama Leah is alive?" Rachel nodded through tears. "She never left you. She thought you'd be coming back. She's been looking for you this whole time." Nia sat still. Then her lip trembled. Her voice came out as a whisper. "Mama Leah?" Rachel placed a hand over hers. "Would you like to see her?" Nia didn't speak. She just nodded. With Maya's help, a video call was arranged. And when the screen lit up, there she was, Leah Nuru. Her hair streaked with gray, her eyes heavy with years of sorrow. But the moment she saw Nia, they filled with light. "My Nia," Leah whispered. Nia stared. The shape of her mother's face, the warmth in her eyes. Something deep inside her recognized it. "Mama?" Leah pressed her hand to her heart. "Yes, baby, it's me. Mama's here." The screen couldn't hold what followed. Tears, smiles, laughter between sobs. They spoke in broken English and Swahili. Rachel and Adam sat quietly beside Nia, overwhelmed and heartbroken all at once. That night, Nia didn't ask to sleep with her teddy bear. She clutched the tablet instead, replaying Leah's voice over and over, until she fell asleep. The video calls became part of Nia's daily rhythm. Every evening she'd sit with the tablet in her lap, eyes glued to the screen. Leah would sing lullabies in Swahili, tell stories from the village, describe how Nia used to dance barefoot in the mud after a rainstorm. And Nia, she remembered, not all of it, but enough. Enough to smile again, to feel whole. But while Nia's heart was healing, Rachel's was breaking. She had fallen in love with this child, cared for her, protected her. But now she was realizing something unbearable. Their family had been built on someone else's loss. Rachel couldn't stop asking herself, if I truly love Nia, am I willing to give her up? She and Adam had long talks late into the night. At first, the thought of letting go felt impossible. But they weren't the same people who had signed those papers. They couldn't pretend anymore that Heartbridge had told them the truth. One morning, Rachel stood in the doorway as Nia chatted with Leah on video. They were singing, off-key and laughing. For the first time, Rachel didn't feel like Nia was theirs. Not entirely. She was a child of two worlds now. Later that week, Rachel called Maya. "We want to do this the right way," she said, "all the way." With Maya's guidance, they began the long process of working with international attorneys, child welfare officials, and Leah herself. It wasn't easy. Custody laws were complicated. Language barriers and jurisdictional red tape slowed everything down. But Rachel and Adam never wavered. And when they called Leah to explain, she wept, not with anger, but with gratitude. "You loved my daughter," she said. "You took care of her. You gave her light. Now, we love her together." What started as a private heartbreak was about to become something much bigger. As Rachel and Adam finalized the shared custody arrangement with Leah, legally, peacefully, and with every ounce of love, they knew their story wasn't unique. If Heartbridge had lied to them, how many others had been deceived too? They couldn't stay silent. With Maya's help, they reached out to Julia Ray, a veteran investigative journalist known for exposing hidden abuses in powerful systems. Julia listened to everything: the falsified death records, the forged paperwork, the $120,000 price tag that came with a stolen child. Then she dug deeper. What she found shocked even Rachel and Adam. Dozens of families. American parents told their children were orphans. African families promised education, not adoption. Consent forms never translated. Death certificates forged. And worst of all, Heartbridge knew. Internal emails showed it. They knew. Julia's report hit the airwaves under the headline, "Adoption Betrayed, the Truth Behind International Child Trafficking in Plain Sight." The fallout was immediate. The FBI launched an investigation. Heartbridge's U.S. headquarters was raided. Executives were arrested. Entire adoption records were seized. And behind every file, every smiling family photo, was a tragedy waiting to be uncovered. Rachel watched it all unfold from her living room. She held Nia close, knowing justice was coming, but also knowing it would never be enough to erase the pain they had all endured. Even as headlines faded and courtrooms quieted, the real work was just beginning. The shared custody agreement was finalized through international cooperation, something few thought was even possible. When Nia was old enough, she would decide where to live permanently. But until then, she would be raised by two families, across two continents, united not by law, but by love. Rachel and Leah began writing letters to each other, awkward at first, careful. But slowly, something fragile began to take shape. A bond not of friendship, but of respect. Forged by pain, held together by one shared truth, they both loved the same little girl. Adam began speaking at hearings, testifying before lawmakers, pushing for stricter regulations on international adoptions. No more sealed records, no more fake deaths, no more stolen children. And Nia? She grew up knowing her story, all of it. She knew she had been taken, lied to, loved, and found again. By the time she turned 16, she stood in front of an audience at an international summit on ethical adoption and said these words: "I was never an orphan. I had a mother. I have two. And I was never supposed to be a secret. Years later, Nia would become a voice for those still searching, for truth, for family, for home. Her paintings, once filled with memories, were now filled with hope. And her story became more than a tragedy. It became a movement. Sometimes, doing the right thing means breaking your own heart to heal someone else's. True love is not about possession. It's about sacrifice, truth, and doing what's just. If you were in their shoes, could you give up the child you raised to reunite her with the mother she never stopped loving? And do you believe two families can truly share one child and both still be whole? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And if this story touched you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you for watching and for standing with stories that matter.